Hello everyone, before we begin tonight's haunting tale, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a moment of the fear. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time the unknown feels closest to you. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and let the whispers of the unknown guide you through the eerie corridors of our story. Ready to face the darkness? The wilderness of the Pacific Northwest stretched endlessly before Sam Calloway as they parked their car at the edge of a rarely traveled forest road. The dense forest rose like a fortress, its towering pines swaying gently in the cool morning breeze. A fine mist hovered just above the ground, twisting and curling around the moss-covered roots and fallen logs that littered the forest floor. The faint scent of pine resin and damp earth filled the air, evoking a sense of calm that belied the ominous tales surrounding this place. Sam had always been drawn to places like this, vast, untamed, and brimming with the promise of discovery. But this trail was different. Unlike the well-worn paths marked on official maps, this one was cloaked in mystery. It had no name, no documented routes, and no assurances of safety. Its existence was whispered about among hiking enthusiasts, a secret passed along in cryptic forum posts and hushed conversations. The most intriguing of these whispers was the post Sam had stumbled upon late one night while researching their next adventure. The title alone had been enough to spark curiosity: "Find the trail, and you'll never forget it." The post had been short, almost dismissive, offering little detail except for a vague set of directions and a single cautionary note: "The beauty hides its danger. Venture wisely." It was enough to ignite the spark of ambition within Sam. Sam stood at the trailhead, or rather, what they assumed was the trailhead. The directions from the post had led them here, to this unassuming break in the trees. Unlike other trails, this one bore no welcoming sign or neatly packed dirt path. Instead, a narrow, overgrown passage disappeared into the underbrush, its entrance framed by two trees whose bark was darkened and gnarled, as though scarred by fire. The faint markings carved into their trunks caught Sam's attention. They appeared to be symbols, abstract, almost tribal, yet unlike anything Sam had seen before. Their lines were sharp and deliberate, etched with a precision that seemed too perfect for age or weather to have eroded. Sam snapped a photo, adjusting the lens to capture the intricate details. A thrill of excitement coursed through them. This was precisely what they'd hoped for: something unique, something no one else had documented. The trail's obscurity, its resistance to the touch of modernity, was a gift to an adventurer like Sam. The forest seemed to pull them in as they stepped onto the path. It was narrow, forcing them to sidestep roots and duck under low-hanging branches. The air grew cooler the deeper they ventured, and the canopy above grew denser, allowing only slivers of sunlight to break through. The morning mist clung to the ground, swirling around their boots with each step. It was as if the forest itself was alive, its mood shifting with the rhythm of Sam's movements. As they walked, Sam took in every detail. The trees here were massive, their trunks covered in moss so thick it looked like a second skin. Occasionally, a patch of vibrant mushrooms added a splash of color to the otherwise muted palette of greens and browns. Birds chirped in the distance, their calls echoing faintly through the dense foliage, and the soft rustle of unseen animals provided a soundtrack to the solitude. But beneath the serenity, there was something else, a subtle, almost imperceptible hum that seemed to emanate from the forest itself. It wasn't a sound so much as a sensation, a faint vibration that Sam felt in their chest. At first, they dismissed it as the wind, but the more they listened, the more it seemed deliberate. It was steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The trail twisted and turned, leading Sam deeper into the wilderness. There were no markers, no signs of human presence beyond the occasional faint footprint in the dirt. Each bend in the path revealed something new: a grove of trees so closely packed that their branches intertwined like the threads of a tapestry, a stream whose crystal-clear waters reflected the sky with mirror-like clarity, a fallen tree whose hollowed trunk had become a home for ferns and moss. Yet, with every step, Sam couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was subtle at first, a prickling at the back of their neck that they attributed to their own overactive imagination. But as the hours passed, the sensation grew stronger. They found themselves glancing over their shoulder more often, their eyes scanning the shadows for movement. Once, they thought they saw a figure, a fleeting shape among the trees, but when they turned to look, there was nothing there. The unease didn't deter Sam. If anything, it fueled their determination. This was exactly what they had hoped for, an adventure that pushed them out of their comfort zone, that challenged their perceptions and tested their resolve. It was what made exploration worthwhile. The trail eventually led to a small clearing, its edges framed by tall grass and wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. In the center stood a lone tree, its branches twisted and bare despite the surrounding greenery. Carved into its bark were more symbols, similar to those at the trailhead but more intricate, almost labyrinthine in their design. Sam approached cautiously, their fingers brushing over the carvings. They felt warm to the touch, as though the tree itself was alive with some hidden energy. Sam pulled out their notebook, sketching the symbols with meticulous care. They couldn't explain why, but something about them felt important, as though they were part of a larger story waiting to be uncovered. The hum in the air grew stronger here, resonating through their body with an intensity that was both exhilarating and unnerving. "What is this place?" Sam murmured to themselves, their voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the grass. The clearing felt like a threshold, a place where the ordinary world ended and something else began. Sam took a deep breath, steeling themselves before stepping back onto the trail. Whatever lay ahead, they were determined to see it through. As the forest closed in around them once more, the hum followed, a constant reminder that they were no longer just an observer in this wilderness. They were a participant in whatever mystery the unmarked trail held, and there was no turning back now. The trail's reputation had spread among the local hiking community like a whispered secret, a tale too intriguing to ignore yet shrouded in an air of foreboding. To seasoned hikers like Sam Calloway, it was an irresistible enigma, a challenge wrapped in mystery. Unlike the well-mapped routes that crisscrossed the Pacific Northwest, this trail had no official designation. It appeared on no government-issued maps, bore no guideposts, and offered no assurances of safety. Yet, it loomed large in the stories exchanged around campfires and on obscure hiking forums. Sam had first heard about the trail during a late-night scrolling session, when they stumbled upon a thread on a little-known online forum for outdoor enthusiasts. The title of the post had caught their eye, "The Trail That Time Forgot." The opening line had been equally compelling, "There's a trail out there that isn't marked on any map, but those who found it say it's like stepping into another world." The details were sparse, almost frustratingly so, but the post's cryptic nature only fueled Sam's curiosity. The most tantalizing part of the thread had been the photos, grainy, low-resolution images that seemed to hint at something extraordinary. One showed a dense, mist-laden forest, its towering trees stretching into the heavens. Another depicted a series of strange symbols carved into a moss-covered tree trunk. The final image was the most arresting, a weathered stone archway, its surface adorned with intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. Beneath the photo was a single caption, "Find it if you dare." The comments beneath the post had been a mix of skepticism and awe. Some users dismissed it as an elaborate hoax, while others shared their own cryptic anecdotes about the trail. One comment, in particular, had stood out to Sam. "I found it once. It's beautiful, but it's not meant for us. Be careful." Another user claimed to have tried finding the trail multiple times without success, describing it as if the forest itself conspired to keep it hidden. For Sam, these whispers of the trail's existence were enough to ignite their sense of adventure. They spent days poring over satellite images, scouring maps, and piecing together fragmented accounts. Each clue seemed to point toward a specific area deep in the wilderness, a region known for its rugged terrain and unspoiled beauty. The locals in the nearby town, however, were less enthusiastic about the trail. When Sam had casually brought it up in conversation with a shopkeeper, the woman's expression had darkened. "That's just an old ghost story," she had said, her voice tight. "People like to talk, but it's better to stick to the marked trails. Folks have gone missing out there." Missing? Sam had pressed, their curiosity piqued. The woman had hesitated before leaning in, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Not missing, exactly. The ones who come back, they're different. Like they've seen something they shouldn't have." These warnings only deepened Sam's resolve. They had heard similar stories about other remote trails, usually dismissed as urban legends or exaggerated tales meant to scare off amateur hikers. To Sam, the idea of a trail that seemed to defy explanation was both thrilling and worth the risk. They weren't reckless, of course. They had prepared meticulously, packing extra supplies, a GPS device, and a sturdy camera to document their findings. But deep down, they believed the stories were just that, stories. The enigma of the trail also lay in its lack of consistent descriptions. Each account Sam encountered seemed to contradict the others. One hiker described it as a place of serene beauty, where sunlight filtered through the canopy in golden beams and the air was filled with the scent of wildflowers. Another spoke of an oppressive silence, where even the birds refused to sing. The carvings, too, were a source of intrigue. Some claimed they were warnings left by ancient tribes, while others believed they were part of a long-forgotten ritual. Then there were the disappearances. These were harder to dismiss. Though no official records mentioned missing hikers in the area, local gossip painted a darker picture. Sam overheard snippets of conversations at the town's diner and general store, where residents spoke in hushed tones about people who had ventured too far and never returned. One elderly man had been particularly blunt. "The forest doesn't like trespassers," he had said, stirring his coffee with a gnarled hand. "You'll find your way in, sure enough. But finding your way out, that's a different story." Despite these ominous warnings, Sam's curiosity outweighed their apprehension. They couldn't shake the feeling that the trail held something extraordinary, something worth the risk. The idea of documenting a place so untouched by modernity was too enticing to ignore. It wasn't just about the blog or the potential fame, it was about discovery, about stepping into the unknown and emerging with a story worth telling. As Sam approached the trailhead that morning, the whispers of the trail's legend played on their mind. The forest seemed to welcome them and warn them in equal measure, its towering trees standing as both sentinels and barriers. The symbols carved into the bark at the trail's entrance seemed to pulse faintly in the morning light, their meaning just out of reach. Sam snapped a photo, feeling a shiver of anticipation. Whatever lay ahead, Sam was ready to uncover the truth about the unmarked trail. They adjusted the straps on their pack, took a deep breath, and stepped forward, their first steps crunching softly on the leaf-strewn path. The enigma of the trail beckoned, and Sam was determined to solve it even if it meant facing the very heart of the unknown. The trailhead was more elusive than Sam had anticipated. Armed with only the cryptic directions from the hiking forum, they found themselves weaving through dense thickets and barely discernible animal paths. The sunlight filtering through the forest canopy grew dimmer with each passing hour, and the whispers of the trail's legend felt almost tangible in the still air. Sam's map showed no markings of a path in this area, and even their GPS device offered little reassurance, its screen displaying an unbroken swath of green. "It has to be here," Sam muttered to themselves, scanning the surrounding trees for any sign of an entrance. The directions had been maddeningly vague: look for the twins that guard the gate, and follow the path that's barely there. They had reread the post so many times that the words were burned into their memory, but out here, surrounded by the overwhelming expanse of the forest, they felt maddeningly insufficient. The search was slow, each step deliberate to avoid the tangled roots and hidden depressions in the forest floor. Sam's gear rustled softly with every movement, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Normally, the woods would be alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of small animals, but here, there was only the occasional creak of the wind through the trees and the steady rhythm of their own breathing. It was nearing midday when Sam finally spotted them, two towering pines standing side by side, their trunks so close together they seemed almost fused. Their bark was darker than the surrounding trees, rough and gnarled like ancient sentinels. What caught Sam's attention, however, were the carvings etched into their surfaces. The symbols were intricate, swirling designs that seemed to mimic natural forms, spirals like coiled ferns, jagged lines like bolts of lightning, and shapes that vaguely resembled eyes. Sam approached cautiously, running their fingers over the carvings. The grooves were deep and precise, their edges sharp as if they had been carved recently. Yet, the moss creeping around the edges suggested they had been here for years, perhaps decades. "The twins that guard the gate," Sam whispered, a thrill of excitement coursing through them. This had to be the entrance. They stepped between the trees, half expecting to feel some sort of change, a drop in temperature, a gust of wind, anything to signify they had crossed a threshold. But the forest remained still, as if holding its breath. The path beyond the twin pines was faint, almost invisible beneath a layer of fallen leaves and creeping vines. It wound its way deeper into the forest, twisting and turning unpredictably. Sam had to push aside branches and duck under low-hanging boughs, their progress slow but determined. They marked their path with small pieces of brightly colored tape, ensuring they could find their way back if necessary. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The trees grew taller and more closely packed, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out much of the light. The air felt cooler here, carrying a faint, earthy scent tinged with something metallic. Sam couldn't place the smell, but it set their nerves on edge. The symbols began to appear more frequently. At first, they were subtle, a spiral etched into the bark of a tree, a jagged line scratched into a rock. But as Sam continued, they became more elaborate and numerous. One tree was covered entirely in carvings, its surface a tapestry of shapes and patterns. Other bore what looked like a human face, its features warped and elongated, as if caught in a screen. Sam paused to photograph each one, their camera's shutter clicking softly in the silence. Hours passed, and the trail seemed to stretch on endlessly. Sam's excitement began to wane, replaced by a growing unease. The forest felt wrong in a way they couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just the silence or the strange symbols, it was the sense of being watched. Sam's every step felt scrutinized, as if unseen eyes followed their progress from the shadows. At one point, they stopped to check their map and GPS. The map, of course, was useless, showing only a blank expanse of green. The GPS wasn't much better. Its signal had grown weak, the screen flickering intermittently. Frustrated, Sam stuffed it back into their pack and pressed on, relying solely on the faint trail and their instincts. The turning point came when Sam stumbled upon a clearing. Unlike the dense, shadowed forest they had been navigating, this space was open and bathed in a strange, diffuse light. In the center stood a stone monolith, its surface covered in the now familiar carvings. The symbols here were different, though larger and more complex, with an almost mathematical precision. The air around the monolith felt charged, as if the stone radiated a subtle energy. Sam approached cautiously, their heart pounding. They reached out to touch the stone, half expecting to feel warmth or vibration. Instead, it was cold and unyielding, its surface rough beneath their fingers. They circled it slowly, taking in every detail. The carvings seemed to tell a story, though its meaning was inscrutable. There were depictions of animals and humans, their forms distorted and intertwined. One section showed what looked like a door or portal, surrounded by spirals and jagged lines. As they studied the monolith, the hum they had felt earlier grew stronger. It was no longer just a faint vibration, it was a palpable force, resonating through their body. Sam stepped back, their breath quickening. They felt an inexplicable urge to leave the clearing, to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the stone. Back on the trail, the unease that had been simmering beneath the surface boiled over. Sam's every instinct screamed at them to turn back, but they pushed on, driven by a stubborn determination to see this through. The symbols continued to guide them, their frequency increasing as the trail narrowed. The trees here were massive, their trunks covered in thick moss that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The air grew colder still, and the metallic scent grew stronger, almost overpowering. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sam spotted it, a break in the trees that revealed another clearing. This one was larger, its edges lined with stones arranged in a perfect circle. At its center stood an ancient stone archway, its surface covered in the same glowing carvings they had seen on the monolith. The archway was massive, its keystone towering high above the ground. The air around it shimmered, distorting like heat waves. Sam approached slowly, their breath catching in their throat. This was it. This was the trail's hidden heart, the place that had eluded so many before them. The hum was deafening now, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeat. They reached out to touch the archway, their fingers brushing against the carvings. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a jolt of energy that shot through their body, leaving them breathless. The carvings glowed brighter, their light pulsating rhythmically. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the silence stretching out endlessly. Sam stepped back, their mind racing. They had found the hidden entrance, but what lay beyond it was a mystery they weren't sure they were ready to face. Yet, despite their fear, they knew they couldn't turn back now. The trail had called to them, and they had answered. Whatever awaited them on the other side of the archway, they were determined to uncover its secrets. The trailhead was more elusive than Sam had anticipated. Armed with only the cryptic directions from the hiking forum, they found themselves weaving through dense thickets and barely discernible animal paths. The sunlight filtering through the forest canopy grew dimmer with each passing hour, and the whispers of the trail's legend felt almost tangible in the still air. Sam's map showed no markings of a path in this area, and even their GPS device offered little reassurance, its screen displaying an unbroken swath of green. "It has to be here," Sam muttered to themselves, scanning the surrounding trees for any sign of an entrance. The directions had been maddeningly vague: look for the twins that guard the gate, and follow the path that's barely there. They had reread the post so many times that the words were burned into their memory, but out here, surrounded by the overwhelming expanse of the forest, they felt maddeningly insufficient. The search was slow, each step deliberate to avoid the tangled roots and hidden depressions in the forest floor. Sam's gear rustled softly with every movement, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. Normally, the woods would be alive with the chatter of birds and the rustle of small animals, but here, there was only the occasional creak of the wind through the trees and the steady rhythm of their own breathing. It was nearing midday when Sam finally spotted them, two towering pines standing side by side, their trunks so close together they seemed almost fused. Their bark was darker than the surrounding trees, rough and gnarled like ancient sentinels. What caught Sam's attention, however, were the carvings etched into their surfaces. The symbols were intricate, swirling designs that seemed to mimic natural forms, spirals like coiled ferns, jagged lines like bolts of lightning, and shapes that vaguely resembled eyes. Sam approached cautiously, running their fingers over the carvings. The grooves were deep and precise, their edges sharp as if they had been carved recently. Yet, the moss creeping around the edges suggested they had been here for years, perhaps decades. "The twins that guard the gate," Sam whispered, a thrill of excitement coursing through them. This had to be the entrance. They stepped between the trees, half expecting to feel some sort of change, a drop in temperature, a gust of wind, anything to signify they had crossed a threshold. But the forest remained still, as if holding its breath. The path beyond the twin pines was faint, almost invisible beneath a layer of fallen leaves and creeping vines. It wound its way deeper into the forest, twisting and turning unpredictably. Sam had to push aside branches and duck under low-hanging boughs, their progress slow but determined. They marked their path with small pieces of brightly colored tape, ensuring they could find their way back if necessary. The deeper they went, the stranger the forest became. The trees grew taller and more closely packed, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out much of the light. The air felt cooler here, carrying a faint, earthy scent tinged with something metallic. Sam couldn't place the smell, but it set their nerves on edge. The symbols began to appear more frequently. At first, they were subtle, a spiral etched into the bark of a tree, a jagged line scratched into a rock. But as Sam continued, they became more elaborate and numerous. One tree was covered entirely in carvings, its surface a tapestry of shapes and patterns. Another bore what looked like a human face, its features warped and elongated, as if caught in a screen. Sam paused to photograph each one, their camera's shutter clicking softly in the silence. Hours passed, and the trail seemed to stretch on endlessly. Sam's excitement began to wane, replaced by a growing unease. The forest felt wrong in a way they couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just the silence or the strange symbols, it was the sense of being watched. Sam's every step felt scrutinized, as if unseen eyes followed their progress from the shadows. At one point, they stopped to check their map and GPS. The map, of course, was useless, showing only a blank expanse of green. The GPS wasn't much better. Its signal had grown weak, the screen flickering intermittently. Frustrated, Sam stuffed it back into their pack and pressed on, relying solely on the faint trail and their instincts. The turning point came when Sam stumbled upon a clearing. Unlike the dense, shadowed forest they had been navigating, This space was open and bathed in a strange, diffuse light. In the center stood a stone monolith, its surface covered in the now familiar carvings. The symbols here were different, though larger and more complex, with an almost mathematical precision. The air around the monolith felt charged, as if the stone radiated a subtle energy. Sam approached cautiously, their heart pounding. They reached out to touch the stone, half expecting to feel warmth or vibration. Instead, it was cold and unyielding, its surface rough beneath their fingers. They circled it slowly, taking in every detail. The carvings seemed to tell a story, though its meaning was inscrutable. There were depictions of animals and humans, their forms distorted and intertwined. One section showed what looked like a door or portal, surrounded by spirals and jagged lines. As they studied the monolith, the hum they had felt earlier grew stronger. It was no longer just a faint vibration, it was a palpable force, resonating through their body. Sam stepped back, their breath quickening. They felt an inexplicable urge to leave the clearing, to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the stone. Back on the trail, the unease that had been simmering beneath the surface boiled over. Sam's every instinct screamed at them to turn back, but they pushed on, driven by a stubborn determination to see this through. The symbols continued to guide them, their frequency increasing as the trail narrowed. The trees here were massive, their trunks covered in thick moss that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The air grew colder still, and the metallic scent grew stronger, almost overpowering. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sam spotted it, a break in the trees that revealed another clearing. This one was larger, its edges lined with stones arranged in a perfect circle. At its center stood an ancient stone archway, its surface covered in the same glowing carvings they had seen on the monolith. The archway was massive, its keystone towering high above the ground. The air around it shimmered, distorting like heat waves. Sam approached slowly, their breath catching in their throat. This was it. This was the trail's hidden heart, the place that had eluded so many before them. The hum was deafening now, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeat. They reached out to touch the archway, their fingers brushing against the carvings. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, a jolt of energy that shot through their body, leaving them breathless. The carvings glowed brighter, their light pulsating rhythmically. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the silence stretching out endlessly. Sam stepped back, their mind racing. They had found the hidden entrance, but what lay beyond it was a mystery they weren't sure they were ready to face. Yet, despite their fear, they knew they couldn't turn back now. The trail had called to them, and they had answered. Whatever awaited them on the other side of the archway, they were determined to uncover its secrets. The forest beyond the clearing seemed to grow denser with each step Sam took. The sunlight, already dim, faded into a faint glow that barely penetrated the thick canopy above. The air was heavy with a metallic scent that clung to their senses, a taste of something ancient and unsettling. The trail, though still present, became narrower and more treacherous, forcing Sam to tread carefully over exposed roots and uneven ground. The symbols carved into the trees became more elaborate and frequent, their designs shifting from geometric patterns to intricate depictions of scenes that Sam couldn't fully comprehend. One tree bore an image of a figure standing beneath a crescent moon, their arms raised toward a swirling vortex of shapes. Another depicted a procession of shadowy forms, their elongated bodies merging with the forest around them. Sam paused to photograph each one, though the growing unease in their chest made them question whether documenting these symbols was wise. As the trail twisted and turned, Sam began to notice subtle changes in the environment. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches twisting together in unnatural formations. The ground grew softer underfoot, almost spongy, as if it had absorbed the weight of countless footsteps before theirs. And always, there was the hum, a low, resonant vibration that seemed to emanate from the earth itself. It wasn't just a sound but a sensation that pulsed through Sam's body, growing stronger with every step. After hours of cautious progress, Sam stumbled upon another clearing, larger than the one before. At its center stood an ancient stone structure, half buried in moss and surrounded by a ring of tall, weathered totems. Each totem was carved with intricate designs, their surfaces adorned with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air around the structure felt charged, as though it pulsed with an unseen energy. Sam approached the totems cautiously, their fingers brushing over the carvings. The stone was cool to the touch, its surface rough and worn by time. Yet the symbols were sharp and distinct, their lines unmarred by age or weather. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the totems were watching them, their carved eyes following their every movement. At the center of the ring stood a pedestal, its top cracked and uneven but still holding a peculiar object. It was a small, metallic sphere, no larger than a grapefruit, covered in the same glowing carvings as the totems. The sphere pulsed faintly, its light waxing and waning like a heartbeat. Sam hesitated before reaching out to touch it, their hand trembling with a mix of fear and curiosity. The moment their fingers brushed the sphere, a surge of energy shot through their body. The hum that had been a constant presence grew deafening, reverberating through their very bones. Images flashed through Sam's mind, shadowy figures moving through the forest, a swirling vortex of light and darkness, and a towering archway framed by glowing symbols. The vision was overwhelming, leaving Sam gasping for breath as they stumbled backward. "What is this place?" Sam whispered, their voice trembling. They had encountered strange sights on hikes before, abandoned cabins, forgotten graveyards, even the occasional odd artifact, but nothing like this. This was something else entirely, something beyond their understanding. The discovery of the pedestal and sphere was just the beginning. As Sam explored the clearing, they found more evidence of the trail's enigmatic past. Scattered among the totems were remnants of objects that defied explanation. There were shards of pottery etched with the same glowing symbols, fragments of what appeared to be tools or weapons made from an unrecognizable material, and bones, animal, human, or otherwise, Sam couldn't tell. In one corner of the clearing, partially hidden beneath a tangle of roots, Sam uncovered a weathered journal. Its cover was cracked and brittle, the leather flaking away at the edges. Inside, the pages were filled with handwritten notes and sketches, the ink faded but still legible. The entries detailed the experiences of a previous traveler, someone who had walked this trail long before Sam. The writer spoke of the same symbols, the same hum, and the same overwhelming sense of being watched. One entry stood out. "The archway is the key. It leads to something beyond our world, a place of beauty and terror. But beware, it does not give freely. The price it demands is steep, and those who enter may not return." Sam read the passage several times, their heart pounding in their chest. The mention of an archway confirmed their suspicions. The carvings they had seen, the visions from the sphere, and the cryptic warnings from the journal all pointed to something extraordinary and dangerous. They couldn't help but wonder what price the trail would demand of them. As night began to fall, Sam decided to set up camp in the clearing. The totems, eerie as they were, offered a sense of protection, their glowing symbols casting a faint light over the area. Sam built a small fire, the crackling flames a comforting contrast to the oppressive silence of the forest. They reviewed the photographs they had taken, their fingers trembling as they scrolled through the images. Each picture seemed to hold a piece of the puzzle, but the full picture remained elusive. As they sat by the fire, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows cast by the flames seemed to shift and move, forming shapes that disappeared when they looked directly at them. The hum persisted, quieter now but still present, a constant reminder of the trail's strange energy. Then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible over the crackling of the fire. But as the night deepened, they grew louder, their tones shifting between a low murmur and a sharp hiss. Sam couldn't understand the words, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to them. Sam turned in every direction, their flashlight cutting through the darkness. The totems stood as silent sentinels, their glowing eyes fixed on the forest beyond. But there was nothing there, no figures, no movement, just the oppressive stillness of the night. Sleep eluded Sam that night. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set their heart racing. The whispers continued, fading in and out like the wind, until the first light of dawn broke through the trees. Exhausted but resolute, Sam packed up their gear and prepared to continue down the trail. The discoveries they had made, the sphere, the journal, the totems, were just pieces of a larger mystery, one that Sam was determined to solve. As they stepped beyond the clearing, the trail seemed to shift again. The trees grew even taller, their branches forming a dense canopy that blocked out the sky. The symbols on the bark became more intricate, their glow more intense. The hum grew louder, resonating through the ground with each step. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, Sam saw it. The archway from their visions, its towering frame shrouded in mist. Sam took a deep breath, their grip tightening on the straps of their pack. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready to face it. The trail had led them this far, and they couldn't turn back now. The discovery was only the beginning. The moment Sam stepped through the towering stone archway, the world around them seemed to ripple and shift. The forest they had known dissolved into a cascade of blurred colors, the hum that had been a constant companion reaching an almost unbearable crescendo. For a brief, terrifying moment, Sam felt weightless, as though the ground had vanished beneath their feet. Then, with a sudden jolt, they landed on solid earth. The forest beyond the archway was unlike anything Sam had ever seen. The air was thick with an otherworldly glow, emanating from the plants that surrounded them. Trees stretched impossibly high into the sky, their trunks covered in bioluminescent moss that pulsed gently with a faint blue light. The leaves shimmered like stained glass, casting multicolored patterns onto the forest floor. It was breathtakingly beautiful, but there was an unnatural quality to it all, a sense that this place was not meant for human eyes. Sam took a tentative step forward, their boots sinking slightly into the soft, spongy ground. The hum persisted, now interwoven with faint, melodic tones that seemed to emanate from the plants themselves. It was as if the forest were alive, not just in the biological sense but with a sentience that watched and waited. Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were trespassing. The trail continued before them, more distinct now but no less strange. The ground was marked with symbols similar to those they had seen before, but these glowed faintly, their edges shifting as though alive. Sam knelt to inspect one, reaching out to touch it. The moment their fingers made contact, a wave of heat coursed through them, accompanied by a vivid image, shadowy figures moving through the forest, their forms elongated and flickering like candle flames. "What is this place?" Sam whispered, their voice swallowed by the forest. They rose to their feet, their gaze darting around the surreal landscape. Every instinct screamed at them to turn back, but the archway behind them had gone dark, its carvings now dull and lifeless. There was no way back, not yet. As Sam ventured deeper into the forest, the sense of unease grew stronger. The glowing plants seemed to lean toward them as they passed, their movements subtle but unmistakable. The melodic tones grew more complex, forming patterns that hinted at language but remained just beyond comprehension. Sam tried to focus on the trail, but their attention was constantly drawn to the shadows that flickered at the edges of their vision. It wasn't long before they encountered the first of the creatures. At first, it was just a pair of glowing eyes, barely visible through the dense foliage. Then the figure stepped forward, its form becoming clear. It was tall and slender, its body composed of shifting shadows that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its eyes glowed with an intense, otherworldly brightness, fixed unblinkingly on Sam. Sam froze, their heart pounding in their chest. The creature didn't move, didn't make a sound. It simply stared, its presence overwhelming in its stillness. Summoning every ounce of courage, Sam took a cautious step back. The creature tilted its head, as if curious, but made no move to follow. Sam took another step, then another, until the creature was swallowed by the shadows. The encounter left Sam shaken, but they pressed on, driven by equal parts curiosity and fear. The forest grew denser, the trail narrowing until it was little more than a faint path through the undergrowth. The symbols on the ground became more frequent, their glow brighter and more erratic. It was as though the forest itself were guiding Sam, leading them toward something or someone. As they rounded a bend in the trail, Sam came upon a clearing unlike any they had seen before. At its center stood a massive tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled, its branches stretching out like skeletal arms. The tree was covered in carvings, each one glowing with a fierce, golden light. Beneath the tree stood a circle of stones, their surfaces etched with symbols that matched those on the trail. The air in the clearing was heavy with energy, the hum now a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through Sam's entire body. Before they could take another step, The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to move. One by one, the creatures emerged, their forms flickering and shifting as they surrounded the clearing. There were dozens of them, their glowing eyes fixed on Sam. Unlike the first creature, these showed no curiosity, only an unrelenting intensity that sent a chill down Sam's spine. Sam's mind raced as they backed toward the center of the clearing, their eyes darting between the creatures and the tree. The circle of stones seemed significant, a boundary of some sort. Hoping it would provide protection, Sam stepped into the circle, their breath coming in shallow gasps. The moment they crossed the threshold, the glow of the symbols intensified, and the creatures stopped. They didn't retreat, but neither did they advance. They simply stood at the edge of the clearing, their forms swaying like shadows caught in a breeze. Sam felt a brief surge of relief, but it was short-lived. The ground beneath them began to vibrate, the symbols on the stones pulsating in time with the hum. A sudden, blinding light erupted from the tree, forcing Sam to shield their eyes. When the light faded, they lowered their hand and gasped. Standing before the tree was a figure unlike any of the creatures they had seen. It was humanoid in shape but composed entirely of light, its form shifting and shimmering like liquid gold. Its eyes were pools of pure white, devoid of emotion yet filled with an overwhelming presence. The figure raised an arm, and the hum grew louder, more intense. Sam fell to their knees, clutching their head as the vibrations threatened to overwhelm them. Images flashed through their mind, the archway, the carvings, the creatures, and the tree. It was as though the figure were showing them the forest's history, its secrets laid bare in a torrent of light and sound. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The figure lowered its arm, and the hum faded to a faint whisper. Sam looked up, their vision blurred, their body trembling. The figure stared at them for a moment longer before turning and melding into the tree. The light dimmed, and the clearing fell silent once more. Sam staggered to their feet, their mind reeling. The creatures at the edge of the clearing had vanished, leaving only the faint rustle of the wind in their wake. The symbols on the stones had faded, their glow now barely perceptible. Sam took a shaky step forward, their gaze fixed on the tree. Whatever had just happened, they knew it was only the beginning. The trail stretched on beyond the clearing, disappearing into the shadows. Sam adjusted the straps on their pack, their resolve hardening. They didn't know what awaited them, but they were determined to find out. With one last glance at the tree, they stepped back onto the trail, the hum rising once more as the forest closed in around them. The air grew heavier with every step Sam took beyond the clearing, and the glowing symbols along the trail pulsed with an urgency that matched their racing heart. The forest, once a surreal dreamscape, now felt like a labyrinth designed to ensnare. The hum was omnipresent, resonating through the ground and into Sam's bones, growing louder as if warning them of the danger ahead. The shadows returned first. At the periphery of Sam's vision, they danced and flickered like smoke caught in an invisible breeze. Then came the eyes, pairs of glowing orbs that pierced the darkness, watching and waiting. Sam quickened their pace, resisting the urge to break into a run. Panic would only make them clumsy, and in a place like this, a single misstep could be fatal. Sam's flashlight, though strong, barely pierced the oppressive gloom. The bioluminescent plants that had once seemed beautiful now cast eerie, shifting patterns on the trees, their glow adding to the disorientation. Every twist and turn of the trail felt the same, and Sam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being funneled toward something that wanted them to keep going. The first attack came without warning. One moment, Sam was walking cautiously, their ears straining for any sound beyond the hum. The next, a shadowy figure lunged from the darkness, its elongated limbs stretching unnaturally as it swiped at them. Sam ducked instinctively, the creature's claws slicing through the air just inches from their head. They stumbled backward, barely regaining their footing in time to see the creature retreat into the shadows, its glowing eyes lingering before vanishing completely. Sam's heart pounded as they clutched the straps of their backpack, their mind racing. The creature hadn't pressed its attack, almost as if it were testing them. But the encounter had made one thing clear: they were being hunted. Desperate to stay ahead of their pursuers, Sam began to run. The trail blurred around them, the glowing symbols and twisted trees blending into a dizzying swirl of light and shadow. The hum grew deafening, punctuated by the sound of snapping twigs and rustling leaves as the creatures closed in. Sam could feel their presence all around, an oppressive weight that threatened to crush their resolve. Out of the corner of their eye, Sam spotted movement. A creature darted between the trees, its form shifting and flickering as if made of liquid darkness. Another appeared on their opposite side, then another, and another. They were everywhere, surrounding Sam, herding them toward an unknown destination. In a desperate bid to shake them, Sam veered off the trail, plunging into the dense underbrush. The foliage clawed at their clothes and skin, but they pushed forward, driven by sheer survival instinct. The creatures followed, their movements unnaturally silent despite their size. Sam glanced back and saw their glowing eyes bobbing through the darkness, relentless and unyielding. The forest itself seemed to conspire against Sam. The ground became uneven, riddled with hidden roots and sudden drops that threatened to trip them. The trees grew so close together that they had to twist and turn to squeeze through, their backpack catching on branches more than once. Each second lost felt like an eternity, the creatures drawing ever closer. Then, through the gloom, Sam saw a faint light. It wasn't the cold, eerie glow of the forest's bioluminescence, but something warmer, almost inviting. Fueled by hope, Sam sprinted toward it, the hum crescendoing around them. As they broke through the trees, they stumbled into another clearing, this one dominated by a massive stone structure. The structure resembled an altar, its surface covered in the same glowing carvings that adorned the archway. Around it was scattered remnants of what might have once been offerings, shards of pottery, charred wood, and bones bleached white with age. The air here was charged with energy, the hum reaching a fever pitch that made Sam's head throb. They barely had time to take it in before the creatures emerged from the forest, their forms more distinct now. They moved with an unnatural grace, their elongated limbs bending in ways that defied logic. Their eyes glowed brighter, fixed unerringly on Sam as they began to circle the clearing. Sam's mind raced as they backed toward the altar. The creatures didn't approach immediately, their movements slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. Sam took a deep breath, trying to steady their nerves. Their survival gear was limited, but they had to make it work. Fumbling with their backpack, Sam pulled out a flare. The creatures recoiled slightly at the sudden burst of red light, their forms flickering as if disrupted. Encouraged, Sam waved the flare in an arc, forcing the nearest creatures to retreat. But the effect was temporary. As the flare began to burn lower, the creatures grew bolder, pressing closer with each passing second. Sam's gaze fell on the carvings on the altar. They seemed to pulse in time with the hum, their light growing brighter as the creatures advanced. An idea began to form, desperate and half-formed but better than nothing. If the symbols on the altar held the same energy as the ones on the archway, perhaps they could be used to repel the creatures. Grabbing a piece of charred wood from the ground, Sam began tracing the symbols onto the forest floor, mimicking the patterns as best they could. The creatures hesitated, their movements faltering as the carvings took shape. The hum shifted, its tone deepening, and the air seemed to grow heavier. The creatures didn't wait long. One of them lunged, its claws outstretched, but Sam was ready. They lit a second flare and threw it directly at the creature, the burning light striking its chest. The creature let out a piercing screech, its form dissolving into shadow as it retreated. The others hesitated again, their glowing eyes flickering like dying embers. Taking advantage of the moment, Sam finished the last symbol and stepped back. The carvings on the altar flared brightly, their light spreading across the ground in a web of intricate patterns. The creatures let out a collective hiss, their forms writhing as the light enveloped them. One by one, they dissolved into the shadows, their glowing eyes the last to vanish. Sam collapsed to their knees, their chest heaving as they tried to catch their breath. The hum began to fade, replaced by a profound silence that pressed heavily on their ears. The clearing, once filled with an oppressive energy, now felt eerily calm. But Sam knew better than to let their guard down. This was far from over. As they rose to their feet, their gaze fell on the altar. The carvings still glowed faintly, their light pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Beyond the clearing, the trail stretched on, disappearing into the darkness. Sam adjusted the straps on their backpack and took a deep breath. The creatures had been driven back, But the forest was far from safe. Whatever lay ahead, Sam knew they had to keep moving. With one last look at the altar, they stepped back onto the trail, the darkness closing in around them once more. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Sam pressed forward, the oppressive silence broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the ever-present hum. The trail narrowed further, its glowing symbols now so bright they cast eerie patterns onto the trees. Sam's mind raced, replaying the events that had brought them to this moment, the carvings, the creatures, the altar. Each fragment of the mystery weighed heavily, forming a puzzle whose solution felt just out of reach. As they rounded a bend in the trail, the air grew colder, the metallic tang intensifying. Sam's breath clouded in the frigid air, their steps slowing as they approached another clearing. This one was different, larger, more deliberate in its construction. At its center stood a massive stone archway, identical to the one they had passed through before, but this one was intact, its carvings glowing with a fierce golden light. The hum grew louder, resonating through the ground and into Sam's bones. They hesitated at the edge of the clearing, their eyes fixed on the archway. It exuded an aura of power, a sense of purpose that was both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Sam could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon them, the forest itself seeming to watch and wait. Steeling themselves, Sam stepped into the clearing. The moment their foot touched the ground, the hum shifted, its tone deepening into a low, resonant thrum that vibrated through the air. The carvings on the archway flared brighter, their light pulsating rhythmically. Sam approached cautiously, their gaze darting between the archway and the surrounding forest. The sense of being watched had intensified, the shadows at the edge of the clearing seeming to writhe and shift. Reaching the base of the archway, Sam ran their fingers over the carvings. The symbols were warm to the touch, their grooves impossibly precise. As they traced the patterns, images began to flood their mind: the forest, the creatures, the glowing symbols, and the altar. Each image was vivid and fleeting, a kaleidoscope of sights and sensations that left Sam breathless. Then came the voice. It wasn't a sound so much as a presence, a feeling that resonated deep within Sam's consciousness. It spoke in a language they couldn't understand, yet its meaning was clear. "Why have you come?" Sam stumbled back, their heart pounding. The question echoed in their mind, accompanied by a surge of emotions that weren't their own. Fear, anger, curiosity, and something else, a deep, aching sorrow. It was as if the forest itself were speaking to them, demanding an answer. I don't know," Sam whispered, their voice trembling. "I just wanted to understand." The hum grew louder, the light from the archway intensifying. The shadows at the edge of the clearing began to move, coalescing into shapes that were all too familiar. The creatures emerged, their elongated forms flickering like flames, their glowing eyes fixed on Sam. But this time, they didn't advance. They stood motionless, their presence more oppressive than ever. The voice returned, its tone sharp and demanding. "To understand is to pay the price. Are you willing?" Sam hesitated, their mind racing. The weight of the question pressed down on them, the implications terrifying. They had come seeking answers, but now those answers seemed to come at a cost they weren't sure they could bear. Yet, turning back was no longer an option. The archway was the key, the culmination of everything they had endured. To refuse now would be to abandon everything. "Yes," Sam said, their voice barely audible. "I'm willing." The moment the words left their lips, the clearing erupted with light. The symbols on the archway blazed brightly, their golden glow illuminating the entire area. The creatures let out a collective hiss, their forms flickering violently before dissolving into the shadows. The hum reached a deafening crescendo, and Sam fell to their knees, clutching their head as the vibrations threatened to overwhelm them. The voice returned, softer now, almost gentle, then faced the truth. The ground beneath Sam shifted, and the world around them dissolved into darkness. For a moment, there was nothing, no light, no sound, no sensation. Then, slowly, the darkness began to lift, replaced by a scene that left Sam breathless. They were no longer in the forest. Instead, they stood in a vast, open expanse, the sky above them a swirling canvas of colors that defied description. The ground beneath their feet was smooth and reflective, like polished glass, and the air was filled with a faint, melodic hum. In the distance, towering structures rose from the ground, their surfaces covered in the same glowing symbols that adorned the trail and the archway. As Sam took a cautious step forward, the scene began to shift. The structures dissolved into mist, replaced by a series of images that played out before them like a living tapestry. They saw the forest as it once was, vibrant and untouched, a place of beauty and harmony. Then came the intruders, figures clad in primitive armor, wielding crude weapons. They tore through the forest, cutting down trees and desecrating the land. The symbols began to appear, carved into the bark of trees and etched into stones, their light dim and flickering. The intruders were followed by the creatures, their forms emerging from the shadows. They were not born of the forest but of the pain and anger that had been sown there. They hunted the intruders, driving them away, but the damage had already been done. The forest was changed, its balance disrupted. The symbols grew brighter, their light a desperate plea for restoration. The final image was of the archway, its carvings glowing with a fierce, golden light. A figure stood before it, their form shrouded in shadow. They reached out to the archway, their hand brushing against its surface. The light flared, and the scene dissolved into darkness. When Sam opened their eyes, they were back in the clearing. The archway stood before them, its light dim but steady. The creatures were gone, and the hum had faded to a faint whisper. Sam rose to their feet, their mind racing. They understood now. The forest wasn't just a place, it was a living entity, a guardian of something ancient and sacred. The trail, the symbols, the creatures, they were all part of a delicate balance, one that had been disrupted by greed and destruction. The voice returned one final time, its tone filled with a quiet sadness. "You have seen the truth. Will you protect it?" Sam nodded, their resolve firm. "I will." The light from the archway pulsed once, and the hum faded entirely. The forest seemed to exhale, its oppressive weight lifting. The trail beyond the clearing beckoned, and Sam knew their journey was far from over. But for the first time, they felt a sense of purpose. They weren't just a traveler or an intruder. They were a part of something greater, a guardian of the unmarked trail and the secrets it held. Sam emerged from the forest into the golden light of dawn, the air around them warm and still. For a moment, they stood at the edge of the tree line, their body aching and their mind overwhelmed by the events of the night. The unmarked trail had vanished behind them, replaced by an unbroken wall of trees that gave no hint of the secrets they concealed. It was as though the forest itself had closed its doors, allowing Sam to leave but ensuring that nothing could follow. Each step back to the trailhead felt surreal, the weight of their journey pressing down on them. Sam's gear, usually a comforting burden, now seemed impossibly heavy. The whispers, the hum, the glowing symbols, all of it felt like a dream, yet the images were seared into their memory with vivid clarity. As they reached the familiar wooden sign marking the official start of the trail, they paused, their gaze drifting back toward the forest. "I promised," Sam murmured to themselves, their voice barely audible. They touched the pendant they had kept from the altar, a simple token carved with one of the glowing symbols. Its once bright light had faded, but it still radiated a faint warmth, a reminder of the truth they had uncovered. Back in the safety of their home, Sam struggled to process what had happened. They laid out their gear, unpacking each item with a meticulousness born of both habit and disbelief. The photos on their camera were their images of the carvings, the forest, and the clearing, but anything involving the creatures or the archway was corrupted, replaced by static and streaks of light. It was as though the forest had ensured its deeper mysteries remained hidden. Sam spent hours scrolling through forums, searching for any mention of the unmarked trail or the symbols they had seen. Most posts were vague rumors of strange sightings, cryptic warnings from other hikers, tales dismissed as urban legends. But here and there were fragments that resonated, a sketch of a glowing symbol, a description of a humming sound, a story of shadows that moved with unnatural intent. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm that others had walked the trail before them and that they had paid the price. Days turned into weeks, but the memory of the trail refused to fade. Sam found themselves drawn to the woods again, though they never ventured beyond the official trails. They would stand at the edge of the forest, their eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the unmarked path. It never appeared, yet Sam couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching, waiting for the right moment to call them back. Their nights were restless, filled with dreams of glowing symbols and flickering shadows. In one dream, they stood before the archway again, the voice echoing in their mind, "The balance must be kept." When they woke, they could still feel the hum vibrating through their body, as though the forest's energy lingered even in the waking world. Sam's experience on the trail began to change them in ways they hadn't anticipated. The once logical and skeptical hiker found themselves drawn to myths and legends, delving into the folklore of the Pacific Northwest. They started a blog to document their research, weaving their own story into the broader tapestry of unexplained phenomena. Their posts attracted a small but dedicated following, a community of seekers and skeptics who debated the meaning of the symbols and the existence of the unmarked trail. But Sam was careful not to reveal too much. They never posted the exact location of the trailhead or shared the corrupted photos. The forest secrets were not theirs to expose, and they felt a deep responsibility to protect what they had encountered. Some things, they wrote in one post, are meant to remain unknown. One night, as Sam sat at their desk poring over old maps and folklore texts, their phone buzzed with a notification. It was an email from an unknown sender, the subject line blank. Curious but cautious, Sam opened it. The message contained a single attachment, an image of the archway, its carvings glowing brightly. Beneath the image was a single line of text. "You are not alone." Sam stared at the screen, their heart pounding. They saved the image and closed the email, but when they tried to reopen it, the message was gone, leaving no trace in their inbox. The experience left them shaken yet strangely reassured. Whoever had sent the message, or whatever, was a reminder that their journey was part of something larger, a connection to others who had walked the same path. Months later, Sam returned to the trailhead, this time not as a seeker but as a guardian. They carried with them a small pouch of offerings, carved stones, feathers, and dried herbs. Standing at the edge of the forest, they whispered a quiet prayer, their words carried away by the wind. The forest remained silent, its secrets hidden, but Sam felt a sense of peace. The balance had been restored, at least for now. As they turned to leave, a faint glow caught their eye. Looking back, they saw a single symbol etched into the bark of a nearby tree. It pulsed faintly, its light growing brighter as Sam approached. They reached out to touch it, feeling the familiar warmth beneath their fingers. The hum returned, faint but steady, a reminder that the forest story was far from over. Sam smiled, their resolve firm. They had faced the unmarked trail and emerged changed, not just as a hiker or a storyteller, but as a guardian of something ancient and sacred. And as they walked away, the forest seemed to whisper its approval, the wind carrying its secrets into the endless expanse of trees.